Hey, I'm Dylan. We're back with FitForm&Function. Today this video is brought to you by GenRacer.com with some NT spec parts. We have some bushings here that are going to go on the shifter bracket. They're supposed to help a shifter feel. We're going to put them in, see what happens. Let's get to it. Alright, some of the tools we're going to need for this install. First off, I've got some flathead screwdrivers, different lengths to get those clips off and move some things around. Another thing, 12mm wrench you're going to need for the shifter weight. It's really going to need that wrench at. 3/4 wrench and a 3/4 socket with a ratchet is going to get your drive shaft off. You can use a 1/2" ratchet. At first I used a breaker bar because I thought they were going to be really tight. You really don't need this. It helps, but you really don't need it. And then we have a 3/4 ratchet with a 12mm socket. That helps with getting down to the top 4 nuts that drops the shifter assembly outside of the car. You don't have to have 3 different size ratchets. That's just what I ended up with. But I got your 10mm for the 2 bolts that hold the plate up to the shifter on the very bottom. That's it. So basically a 10mm, 12mm socket, 12mm wrench, 3/4 wrench and socket. You might want to use a dead blow hammer for the shifter bracket when you're putting it back in. Those Delrin bushings are basically made to fit perfect, so it's going to be a little tough getting it in, but it's going to be very rewarding once everything's together because you're going to have absolutely no play, and that's what we're looking for. But you're going to need a little bit of assistance getting it back in. Flashlight's always handy, and last but not least, if you have one or torque wrench to torque those bolts, those 3 bolts back in for the drive shaft. They're pretty short, it's about 90 to 100 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. You just get them nice, good and tight. That's a little bit tighter than what you want your normal wheels at. So I mean, you definitely can do that with your own hand. But that's pretty much it.
Alright, so probably one of the easiest things that you can do for this install is just taking the shifter knob off. Especially being a 2013, that's super easy to do, because they're not really tight from factory anyways. They just spin right off. And that's going to allow you to have the shifter drop straight down from the bottom. After you've taken the shift knob off, we're going to have to get to this under here first. Now of course, if you want to, you can do all this before you do the bottom section. I really didn't know what was necessary to do all this, so I just went the way I went. But gotta have the shift knob off. Then we're gonna take the leather out, and it's basically, I already got one side up so you can kind of see. You get clips on the side here, so you just have to pull up, and it's not going to be easy at first, but you will pull up. And then we have to get this piece off here, which I'm going to use both hands. But really what you're doing is you're getting these white teeth out, and it pops up pretty easy. Just use, both hands to brace. And the bolts that we mainly need to get out are these 4 nuts here. That's going to drop the plate down. And this shifter assembly. Alright, so we got this huge block off of the short shifter. Or it's not short shifter, I'm sorry. I wish I had a short shifter. But just the shifter assembly itself. It sat down just like this, and it bolted on the sides with these 3 bolts. They're 12mm, by the way, and after doing this, I definitely recommend you doing all of this first before you even go into the car. Take all this apart, because it's not very easy to do when everything's loose on the bottom. Okay, so we are under the car, and we are looking at the drive shaft currently, and what I've done, I've jacked the car up all the way around, and I have it in neutral. So So that'll allow me to spin the drive shaft in hand. And what we will have to do is take off these 3 silver bolts. We can leave these alone. What we're going to do is take these off. Yeah, we're going to take these 3 silver bolts out. There's one on the back side. And there are 3/4 bolts. So probably the best thing is a nice big ratcheting wrench for some leverage to break those loose. What we are actually doing today is getting that bracket right there off, and you can see there's the bushing right back in there and the clip at the end of the bracket we're going to be getting off. And there's the one up top. There's another. Alright, so I just used a breaker bar and a wrench to break them loose, and they were actually not as tight as I thought they were going to be, which is fine. I'm actually using a wrench on this side to hold, and then just a breaker bar here. As you can see, that's already loose. They're just sitting there, so I'm going to keep my wrench on this side and just get me like maybe a 1/2 or a 3/8 ratchet with 3/4 socket, and it'll go a lot quicker. My ratcheting wrench wouldn't fit on either side due to clearance issues, but that's okay. If you can see here, we have yellow paint marked here and there, and that's going to be our positioning for when we put it back on, because for fitment and noise and all the clearances, it's always good to put stuff like this the exact same way that was, so for the best fitment possible. So mark's already there. If you want to, you can mark just alongside here, so you know you can come all the way from here to here across with like a marker or something, so you know exactly which one goes where. Now of course you only want to do one, so you can differentiate how it goes back on, but this should slip right off and slip right back on. But so let's go ahead and get that done. And like I said, we're going to use that marking so we know exactly where to put it back. Get the light back on. We're going to use that marking right there to know exactly where we got to put the drive shaft back together. And it literally just, after we have all 3 bolts out, just slips out. And it can slip through one of the grooves, and we're just going to let it sit off to the side. We're going to try to do this without taking the heat shield out. We're going to try to do as little as possible, make it easier for everyone else. But if we do need to take it off, I will show you that. But it's that easy. Didn't have to pry it or anything, it just popped right out. But mind you, this car does only have about 17,000 miles on it, so that probably does factor into that. Okay, so we got the drive shaft slid over to the side, hanging on the heat shield. We're going to see if we can just leave it that way, see how much clearance we have. We are going to now take this bushing off, or not bushing, I'm sorry, cover for the shifter, and slide it back, get it out of the way so we can get the shifter linkage apart. Alright, so that's what it looks like with the cover off. So next we're going to take the clip on the very bottom of that cylinder to the left off, and see it's really a pin, and you got the face on this side and the clip on the other, and we're going to push it out that direction once we get the pin off. Alright, we got the pin out. After a little bit of finesse with a flathead screwdriver, you can push the pin back and get it to pop out of that, or the clip out of that pin, and then it just of course pulls right out. We have 2 bolts left. You can see the one right there and the one's on the other side of the shifter, holding the shifter in, and we should be able to pop those out, slide the shifter down, and then work on getting the shifter bracket out. That should be just about it. Alright, now that we have some clearance, we are going to start taking the clips out. What you kind of have to do is, it's a clip that you have to pull back and it slides all the way off, and then the pin slides out of it. It'll be easier to show you once everything's out of the car. You'll get a better understanding of how it works. We're just going to push the shifter down through the bottom. I'm going to go up under the car and take this out from the bottom, and then I'm going to come back up and we're going to take out the 4 nuts. Got 2 here and 2 here, and that should drop the whole assembly, and we should be able to take everything over to the bench and start taking a look at everything. Alright, we got the shifter bracket here off the car and on the table, and what we're replacing is these bushings here in this bracket. Now we got 1 out and 1 still in, and all it is basically with a cylinder with 2 rubber washers or keepers. You have this pin that actually sits inside of it in the car, and this is what locks down on the transmission. It'll be easier to show you outside of the car, but this little tab here has got to be pulled out before it can be twisted forward and pulled out. So you can't just pull it straight out because there's a tab inside, so you're going to have to pull back then pull out. You might use 2 different flathead screwdrivers, you just have to work with it. But we're changing out, like I said, these bushings here. You can see how much play it actually has inside of the bracket. These new IntuSpec bushings should really help with that. I was actually just barely pushing on this one when it popped out, and just to show you, I mean, they come right out, and they have a lot of play, and I'm hoping with these new bushings we can get a little bit of that taken care of. And let's just try to put them in. Like I said, they pop right in. And when they're in place, there is no play. They're just straight Delrin bushings. So should help a lot with shifter feel. The motors in these cars are really great, but where it really lacks from factory is these bushings. So that's pretty much it. It's a super easy install once you get the shifter bracket off. So we're just going to put it back in. Alright, so for the reinstall of everything, you basically just do the exact same thing that you did to take everything out. Just go back through the steps, take the shifter bracket, put it up above the transmission, put the one with the bushings in first before you bolt it up. That's going to give you play. So put that in, then put your drive shaft back in. Don't forget to torque everything down. Actually put your shifter in before the drive shaft, you know, and then bolt everything from the top, put everything back together. Drive shaft can actually go together last, and tighten everything up, double check everything. But yeah, it's super simple to just put everything right back to the way it was. There's nothing really different that you should do. It's just going to have a little bit harder time getting everything back together. And so we're going to get everything buttoned up and do some testing, driving, and we'll tell you how everything feels a little bit later. We're basically finished up with the install. We've been driving it for about like 2 weeks now. I've driven a little bit longer because we're going through like the holiday season right now, and I haven't had much time to finish this video, but it's just more time spent on actually reviewing the bushings, really. But they're great. I can't really say anything bad about them. It's a tight fit getting back in, but other than that, I mean, there's no downside to having them. There's absolutely nothing bad to say about it. There's still not a whole lot changed with cold temperature, but that was to be expected. when it's warmed up, the biggest change I saw right off the bat was downshifting from first to second. You know, usually when you're turning, making a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn, and you don't have to stop, you're just, you're just about to stop and you turn. Well, my car before, it would almost never go into first. It was always basically just keep it in second unless you're stopped. But now I found that it was a lot easier to get into first, and just going through the gears in general, it's stiffer, it's firmer. You know, it's small, but it's there. You can tell. There's what I like to say about them is it inspires confidence. That's the biggest thing I felt right off the bat. I was more confident in the shifting of the car, because we all know the car falls short at that point. But since we started this, GenRacer.com has released the bushings. They are on their website. I'll have a link to it on the description, and they're like $30. So I was amazed at how cheap they are. So please, go pick them up. It's a great deal. I figured $30 would be more of like a a sale price, but right now it's $30, just MSRP, so that's great. So like I said, great product. Go check them out, and thanks again. Have a good one.